Thanks for joining us for Issues and Answers. I'm Ian Boyne. Jamaica later this month hosts the United Nations World Tourism Organization's Global Conference. And here to talk to us about that, as well as issues related to tourism, is Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Edmund Bartlett. We thank you for your company. Minister, good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Ian.
It's
always good to be on your program.
Thank you so much, Minister. Minister, give us a background to this conference and tell us why it is so important to Jamaica.
Well, this year is being observed as the International Year of Sustainable Tourism for Development, and it's being managed by the specialist arm of the United Nations, which is the UNWTO, and that's the arm responsible for promoting global tourism. So this year, the concentration has been on sustainability issues, and particularly how do we make tourism be more impactful in the economies of countries that are recipients of visitors across the world. The fact is that tourism has become the fastest growing economic activity globally, and it currently employs 293 million people and represents 10% of global GDP. That statistic also indicates that 1 in 10 workers of the world are employed in tourism, directly or indirectly. But more importantly, it generates $7.6 trillion across the world. And last year alone, 1.2 billion people traversed the different parts of the world and spent $1.3 trillion in pursuit of experiences. 79 countries are now having tourism dependence of 10% and more. 79 countries. And of those, the top 13 in the world are in the Caribbean. So the Caribbean is the most tourism dependent region on earth. We have average dependence on of GDP of 41%.
That's high.
And in some countries, like Antigua and so on, and even smaller countries like St. Bart's and Anguilla and St. Martin and so on, have dependence of up to 90%. So a conference in the frame of how do we sustain economic growth, create jobs, and have inclusion in all of this process is vital in a year like this. And placed in a region that is the most tourism dependent on earth is of significance. So this conference brings together a partnership of all the key players and main contributors to the development of tourism globally. The UNWTO, the government of Jamaica, the World Bank Group, of course, and the IDB. So what we have in addition to those key partners are some collaborators, the OAS, the CHTA, the CTO, the World Travel and Tourism Council, which is the main private sector arm of global tourism, as well as George Washington University, and the UII, which represents the academia. And then for the NGO side, Chemonics out of Washington. So this constellation of institutional arrangement is the most potent and powerful that you could ever assemble in any one place.
And tourism ministers will be at the conference also?
Tourism ministers from 157 countries are expected to be here. So far, over 60 countries have registered, and more than 300 delegates have already registered. And we have just under 4 weeks to go.
Will there be a special emphasis, Minister, on the small and medium-sized enterprises in the tourism industry? And has this been a particular focus of yours?
Well, it really has been. And I think that to understand, therefore, what the content of the conference is to recognize that tourism with that potential for economic growth and to be a driver of job creation has to look at the element that is most affected. And the element that's most affected is the small and medium entities. The fact is that 80% of global tourism is the small and medium entities.
80%?
80%, right? But there is a asymmetry here because the flow of resources is in the reverse. It is 80% that goes to the 20%, and less than 20%, in fact, that goes to the 80%. So this conference is going to discuss that. We're going to look at how do we create a balance here? How do we do some rebalancing and create greater symmetries? And why we need to do that is that if tourism is to be an agent of poverty alleviation and is to transform the economic fortunes of the recipient countries, then we have to look carefully at those who are at the center of it, and it is the small and medium. But who are the people who enable these small and medium entities to grow, to thrive, and to be creative? It is the financial institutions. It is the multilateral financial partners. And that's the significance of bringing them to the table.
World Bank, IDB.
That's correct. So we are now going to have a discussion of how do we make the creative ideas have potency by allocating resources for the conversion. Because the creative products only come when you can convert the ideas into material value with, at a price, then the economy begins to move. So we bring the universities together for ideas.
Yes.
We bring the policymakers, the politicians, and the UNWTO.
Those who can implement.
Those who can, no, frame policy that determine the framework within which these things can happen. And then we bring the NGOs, who are a key part of the civil society and to enable community development and activity. And they bring with that now the banks who have the resources, the money to do it. So it's a perfect mix. And out of all of these discussions will come a frame that will help to guide the future development of tourism in the world.
So this conference can have a major impact on Jamaica and other countries of similar size in terms of just policies coming out of the multilateral institutions.
Yes.
Having a positive impact. Let's follow up on that when we come back from the break, Minister. Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, talking about the upcoming UN World Tourism Organization's global conference that will be near the end of this month, a conference that will have an impact on Jamaica. We take a break, but we'll be right back.
Nutritious food, succulent dishes, superior workmanship, and excellent service. Jamaica is on the go. Let's grow what we eat and eat what we grow. Let's harness the indomitable spirit of our most valued resource, our people. Let's support our local businesses. After all, buying Jamaican means building Jamaica.
Original.
Between November 27th and the 29th, there will be an important conference, the United Nations World Tourism Organization's global conference in Jamaica, dealing with critical issues that will have an impact on Jamaica. The Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, is our guest. So yes, Minister, there's this focus on the small and medium, I think you have a phrase, small and medium tourist enterprises, and there'll be that focus at this conference.
Yes, actually, and I think Jamaica has something to brag about and to tell the world, because it really has been our focus. And in my presidency or chairmanship of the affiliates of the UNWTO, we have been championing and pushing this. And this one of the reasons the conference is in Jamaica is that we have literally coined the phrase of the SMTE.
SMTE.
Yes, and we put a big green on the T, not because of any other reasons, but simply because it is a reflection of growth. And we're saying that if tourism is to thrive, the element that is underpinning its growth must be dealt with and must be given greater priority and has to be funded better. Because we discovered that last year, less than 1% of the total funding from multilaterals globally went into tourism and for the small and medium enterprises. So we have to create some...
reverse that.
Absolutely. And so this is one of the reasons why people like Economies are brought into the picture, because they are an NGO that does implementation on behalf of the multilateral donor countries, USAID and so on and so forth. We also have the Japanese investment group that is going to be here.
Oh, they will be?
Yes, they will be here. The IIC will be here. The IFC will be here. And at the level of the president and vice presidents. So we are not talking about getting just regular members of these institutions.
Persons,
very high level
World
persons.
Bank, IDB.
Absolutely.
USAID will be here.
Will be here. The OAS Secretary General will be here.
Himself will be here.
In addition, we're going to be having presidents and prime ministers and a whole range of ministers. But back to the issue of the small and medium enterprises, because that's the soul of tourism. The real experience, which is what the visitor travels the world to have, is provided by these. They are the owners of it. It is the people. When you come to Jamaica, it's not the all-inclusives that are driving. It's the little man who people gravitate towards.
The culture, yes.
And so what we want to do is to make those little people a greater beneficiary of the expenditure of the visitor.
So you want to increase the value added in the tourism industry. You want to increase the linkages between tourism and other sectors of the economy.
Absolutely. And this is where...
Greater inclusiveness.
And if you recall, we established that structure immediately as I became minister.
Yes.
20 months ago, we established 5 pillars of growth, which, if you recall, was new products, new markets, new partnerships, new investments, and the renewal of our human capital, right? Then we developed the 5 networks that will underpin these growth. One was gastronomy, the other was shopping, the other was health and wellness, then there's entertainment, sports, and music, and all the creative things, and then the final was knowledge. And knowledge entails meetings, conventions, exhibitions, and events such as this conference. So we are saying that within those 5 networks reside the passions of people, and people travel to fulfill their passions. So if we invest within those areas, then we will be building the reasons for people to travel. And they sleep somewhere.
Yes.
So they get hotel rooms that are, and they need to fly to get here or come by boat, so we have transportation. But the key of it all is to build out the experiential aspect of the product. And who owns the experience? The little people.
Little people.
And that is why we have done 2 other things. One, we established the Exim Bank program, which enabled a window to be opened for small and medium entities to have loans at 5%. If you recall me talking about 5 by 5 by 5.
Yes.
So it's a minimum of 5 million up to 25 million at 5% repayable over 5 years. And so this also supported the already established small business program through the Jamaica National Building Society's Small Building Loan Bureau. And that has already been providing loan assistance to small transportation operators and small hotels. So we are building out that capacity in terms of the economic and the capital arrangements. The second element of it now was the human capital side. And later this evening, I am launching the Jamaica Center for Tourism Innovation in Montego Bay, which is the pathway institution which we discussed on one of your programs for professionalism in the industry. So as to build out the sous chefs and those middle levels up into the higher levels. So people who graduate from university with a first degree can come to this institution, much like the Norman Manley School, and become certified in various areas of the industry, so they can help to replace the number of foreign professionals who come into the industry. And then the third aspect of it with it is the development of the Craft Development Institute, which is now to train our artisans to broaden their range and their scope of productive output, so they could give us a broader variety of indigenous Jamaican craft.
They can spend more.
So they can spend more, and when they come here, their visit is authenticated because they have a real Jamaican product. Not made in China or made in Singapore or wherever, but made in Jamaica. So in this way, when you tie that now to agriculture and manufacturing, because agriculture and manufacturing represents what we call the indirect tourism impact. And then the induced are those other items that I mentioned. And so tourism consists of the direct flows, that is from the hotels and the marketing, and then the indirect from your linkages with agriculture and manufacturing, and then you're induced from the services that are provided and the experiences from the little people all across Jamaica.
Minister, I'm out of time, but we can't leave without talking about the latest figures to do with tourism growth. The sector has been doing well, both in terms of investments and earnings. What's the latest figures saying?
Well, we're doing very well, if I'm allowed to say so. This quarter that has just ended is a record quarter for tourism for all times. We are averaging 12% growth for that quarter, which will be reflected, I'm sure, in the GDP growth figures that will come out this period. But the earnings have equally been high. We're over 8% growth in earnings, which is significant. But the third quarter for our fiscal year, and the final quarter for the calendar year, we've started October at a record 20% growth, which is the highest growth we have had for any month ever. And November is shaping up to be a very powerful month. And December, of course, is usually a very strong one. So this quarter is going to be another major quarter. So we're looking at closing the year at somewhere in the region of 4 to 4.2 million visitors, which would be the first time that we'll be breaking the 4 million barrier of visitors, cruise and stopover. And the earnings will be closing in on 3 billion.
3 billion?
We'll be closing in. I expect somewhere in the region of 2.89 to 2.9, and with a little luck, we may make the 3 billion. If we do, we would have attained a landmark and a milestone that will begin to show the true impact of tourism, because at a retention rate of 30%, we would have $1 billion US in circulation from tourism, which would be part of where we want to be. Remember, my objective is 5 by 5 by 5. We want to get 5 million visitors and $5 billion US earning. So if we make the 3 this year, we have 2 to go.
Thank you very much, Minister of Tourism.
But before I go, I really want to invite Jamaicans to the conference. Because it is open to the world.
Rose Hall?
On the 27th to the 29th at the Convention Center in Montego Bay. And you can register as, to attend the conference by just going to the UNWTO website and register. It's free, and we're going to be there. Elements of it which we have not talked about, which we will hope to get another program to talk about, are going to also be made available in the media over the next few weeks.
Thanks very much, Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, on Issues and Answers. Next week I'll be back. Until then, Ian Boyne wishing you a pleasant day.